The belief comes into, through electricity to the people, whatever. That's why we play so loud, because it doesn't actually hit through the eardrums like most groups do nowadays. They say, well, we're going to play loud too because they're playing loud. And they got this real shrill sound, and it's really hard. We're playing for our sound to go inside the soul of the person, actually.
His abilities were so extraordinary and his contribution so unique that no other guitarist has made such an impact as Hendrix did.
Jimi Hendrix as a guitar player, I'd never seen anybody quite like that at all. He took a Fender Stratocaster, a right-handed guitar, flipped it upside down and played it left-handed. He restrung it so the strings were in the right order, but this left the controls at the top of the guitar instead of the bottom.
Well, when people think about how influential Jimi Hendrix was as a guitar player, I guess he wrote the book really, because before him there were kind of linear players. People played in straight lines. Great guitar players. You were either chordal, like a Pete Townsend, playing very heavy power chords, or you played in straight blues lines, B.B. King style solos.
He created a whole palette, a whole template, a whole colour of guitar playing.
Jimi became the centre of a clique of hangers-on and yes-men, all keen to grab a bit of the starlight. His mental health was never terribly robust, as talk show host Dick Cavett found out to his cost with a throwaway remark which brought a painfully honest reply. It's obvious from the tone of his voice that Jimi is dealing with some very serious mental issues. We know now that they were brought on by a combination of work, stress and frustration. All of these factors were compounded by the constant availability of drugs and a never-ending army of companions ready to share the experience. The chaotic nature of Jimi's life in the late 60s as a peace-loving icon of the hippie culture is in total contrast to his earlier life as a professional soldier in the US Army. Jimi was born in Seattle, Washington, and began life on the road as a touring musician after his service in the Army. He toured with several R&B groups, most notably the Isley Brothers and Little Richard, before moving to swinging London, where he became part of the growing blues and psychedelic scene.
Hendrix, because of his musical background, had played on what's called the Chitlin circuit, backing all sorts of different acts. Little Richard he played for, and lots of other people that you wouldn't have heard of and I'd never heard of at the time. But his experience doing that and his love of blues and jazz, and the fact he loved songs and you later on found out he loved Bob Dylan, and so he was influenced by folk music as well. He somehow managed to pull all that together into his guitar style. And one thing I always think about Hendrix is, if you listen to certainly the live recordings, sometimes you just need Mitch Mitchell and Jimi Hendrix. You just need drums and guitar, and that's all you need.
When he was really taking off in the 68, 69, where he was really peaking, that was the West Coast sound you were hearing. It was a lot of, there was the Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead, and Jimi Hendrix was right in there. He actually, I think, took that musical style, the Summer of Love and whatnot, to a higher level of musicianship, really.
His outstanding talent meant that Jimi soon began to establish a name for himself. He was fortunate to be under the guidance of manager and former Animals bassist Chas Chandler, who helped Jimi to form a power trio known as the Jimi Hendrix Experience. The Experience featured drummer Mitch Mitchell and bassist Noel Redding.
In September 1966, and I got the gig with the Experience. Every time I got rid of the Telecaster. Well, I don't know, they just asked me to sit in for a minute. And like each has some chords, which will age out nowadays. Like I can pick things up very quickly. I think he was very surprised that he just told me and I played them.
The great thing about the Jimi Hendrix Experience was it was thrown together at the last minute, and a more unlikely pairing you could be hard to find really. Little 19-year-old drummer Mitch and little Noel Redding, who was originally going to be a guitar player, thought he was going to play with the New Animals and ended up playing bass guitar with Jimi Hendrix. So it was a bit of a shock, all three of them.
It was fantastic because it was so new. Nobody was doing anything remotely close to what Hendrix was doing. When RU Experience came out, I'd never heard anything like it, and just the guitar, the heavy guitar riffs coming out of the guitar of a power trio was quite amazing, because Noel Redding on bass is actually a guitar player who took over the job of being the bass player, so he came at the bass from a different angle than a bass player, And Mitch Mitchell, of course, on drums was, he was almost played with some heavy, I kind of think of it as a heavy jazz type form, just rolling along like a train out of control in a way, which kept Jimi Hendrix totally on track and really made the songs. The three of them together were an amazing trio.
Mitch Mitchell, on the other hand, was an excellent drummer. Not in your traditional style of drumming, he was more of a jazz drummer. He even held his stick in the left hand like a jazz drummer. And Hendrix liked that in Mitch, the fact he could improvise and was a jazz drummer, had these roots in jazz playing. It meant when Hendrix went off on these wild excursions that only he knew where he was going, Mitch could follow him. Where Noel was stuck in the corner going, what are they doing? What are they doing? I'll just sort of play a couple of notes here. This is my opinion. Some other people would disagree with me.